And I think possibly one of the biggest challenge in a global role is understanding what is culturally appropriate in one country or even one business unit versus another. So you might find that you work for a company that may be based out of a certain place. So I've worked a lot in American based companies and yet had global roles. And so
Mm,
there's been this level of discussion, if you like, about what are the right company standards that we would want to have for environment, health, and safety. And yet, how does that also apply across different countries and cultures when they may have different standards or expectations themselves? And I'm talking beyond legislative requirements.
mm.
It's things that may or may not be easy to do, or a certain standard or expectation that a company may like to set may not be the norm or even possible to do in another country. Every company has a different vision. Every company has different standards,
Mm.
different aspirations as well of what they'd like to do. But once you agree upon that as a company, there are these movements that you can have across the different business units to be able to encourage them to adopt those different standards. And I think the biggest thing that I learned over the years was patience, because, every part of a business has different drivers, leaders and employees, and ultimately your colleagues. They are working on what their priorities are in a point in time, and it may not necessarily be the same as yours. So,
Mm.
one of the pieces I think is around having patience and understanding that just because as a global leader you have certain goals and aspirations that you'd like to drive the company towards in the long term, doesn't mean that that always lines up with the constraints or context that the other business units have. And that's probably the second point, which is around context. I do think it's super important to deeply understand the organization that you're working in, and not only trying to say, well, these are my standards or this is my country's standards where I'm
Mm.
coming from, and actually understand that business context, because the people on the ground, they're the ones who are living those lives every day. They know what's possible every day. And if you come in, I remember someone said to me once, Megan, you come on all these visits, because I would be traveling around the world and, flying around and visiting everyone and so forth. And someone said to me, you come here and we're all very nice to you, but, we kiss you on the cheek and say goodbye when you leave. And ultimately, you've gone then. And it really resonated with me, which was to say, as a global leader, I may have the vision. I may be trying to bring others along with me, but ultimately the execution happens at the local business unit level or local country level, and they have their context and their constraints in which they're operating.